Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far it works.
X 2017 met, which was an organization and international drill that had to do with long duration power outages, and FEMA was along one of the organizations that met with this, as I've gone over in previous videos. And this was done by the Electric Infrastructure Security Council, or the EIS Council. And as you can see right here, it stands for Emergency All-Sector Response Transnational Hazard Exercise. And the mission is designed to improve community resilience to large-scale, long-duration power outages through multi-sector exercises. And that's very interesting and suspicious indeed, because didn't Houston and didn't the areas of Texas experience a power outage of close to 250,000 people? And it just so happened that this exercise came exactly a week after Taiwan experienced a power outage where millions were affected. No surprise or coincidence there either. Now, the actual drill that took place a week ago was only about 4 hours long, but they were also preparing for black sky hazards that were associated with subcontinent scale long duration power outages with cascading failure of all other increasingly interdependent infrastructures. And you're going to see exactly how they define a black sky event. Now, according to them, a black sky hazard is a catastrophic event that severely disrupts the normal functioning of our critical infrastructures in multiple regions for long durations. And didn't FEMA say they're going to be in Texas for years? Didn't they say they're going to stay there for a long time? Oh, very interesting and suspicious indeed. And some of the hazards that they also covered and talked about are man-made hazards, including an EMP, an IEMI that has to do with the power going out, cyber terrorism, because they want you to believe it's actual terrorism, then also coordinated physical assaults, and then natural hazards also, like seismic events that have to do with earthquakes and none other than hurricanes and other severe weather events. And then a day later, Hurricane Harvey just so happens to make storm and gain traction on the Texas area. Do you think that's a coincidence? Do you think that's just mere surprise? You decide. And of course, this happened just a week before FEMA and your government organizations are preparing for what they call National Preparedness Month, which is the month of September, and this year's theme will be, quote, disasters don't plan ahead, you can.
Hey folks, and welcome to another video from plaintruth.info. But I wanted to bring your attention to some big picture that no one else I know besides Truth Zone, who's alerted me to it in the comments section, has brought to anybody's attention. So let's get into it right away. So what was the big outcome? We'll get into the non-disaster that was Hurricane Irma in Florida. But what did they run out of? Power. 12 million without power. So they have a problem with power. This is the way they're setting us up. And I brought to your attention this company called Solarin. Solarin Company, and let's read about them for a sec. Here you see it's a sun-based, using mirrors to direct laser energy onto what they call a round ball Earth. So the DoD projects the demand for electricity will grow by 33%, US 100% worldwide. Baseload will continue to provide the vast majority of electricity generation, but their mission is to create and deliver cost-competitive space electricity, provide clean power for the flat Earth, high reliability electricity generation for our customers, and outstanding returns for investor relations. Design, develop, launch, and operates the world's first space solar power plants. Deliver environmentally safe and clean SSP-generated electricity 24/7 at prices competitive with coal, natural gas, and nuclear generation. Okay. They're going to build plants with hundreds of gigawatts of clean baseload capacity, significantly improve. Now, I went into another video about this Gary Spernak and the founder and chief executive and his partner, all military guys, all from the military, all from Lockheed and Hughes and all the rest of these military industrial complex quasi public partnerships with the governments. Okay. But here's what I want to bring your attention to. Well, let's do this first. So the Wikipedia here, it says it's as a startup corporation to utilize solar energy for terrestrial electricity usage. In 2009, it had a contract under negotiation with Pacific Gas and Electric to deliver 200 megawatts of power for 15 years, starting in 2016, slightly more than California's projected energy. As of 2014, delivery has been moved back to the end of the decade, 2020. Plans to provide the electrical power for PG&E customers from solar panels mounted on satellites placed on Earth's orbit. The satellite would convert this energy into radio waves, RF, and send it to receiving stations in Fresno. Plans to provide 200 megawatts of continuous power, estimated the average of 150,000 homes. The project would be the first implementation of space-based solar power. Was first dreamed up in 1941 by Isaac Asimov. Yes, he's the one that helped with faking the NASA stuff too, folks. They're all in the same club. And here you can see from an article back in tax day 2009, Solarian Corp to supply California with space-based power. So they've been planning on this for quite a while. Here you see the pictures, the solar panels up in space, the mirrors being used to collect the energy, the RF frequencies, beaming it down to a pad down here. And if you want to see what that looks like, we can go right to here. Let's do it right here. And there you see the design of how it's being beamed down from space down to these solar panels down on the ground. And remember I said about Fresno, world's biggest solar farm planned that's happening in Fresno, like 80 megawatt farm. There's actually much bigger ones now, and you can see here, here's their farms, here's their solar farms, here's how they're setting it up to do it, saying they're making energy for everybody, but in fact this is for their planned worldwide power supply from space. And some of you noted space doesn't exist, but there's plenty of space, especially between a lot of people's ears. So anyway, I want to show you this article that I just saw the other day. Other states could share oversight of California grid. This was actually September 12th, 2017. And here we see this article about California giving away its power rights so that other states could share oversight of California's power grid under a plan introduced by state lawmakers that would save as much as $1.5 billion a year when we're $21 trillion in debt. It's going to be good for the California ratepayers, they say, they tell us, right? Right. So back to this Solarian Corp. Here's their partnerships they have everywhere, their patents they have with Canada, China, Europe, India, Japan, Russia, US. It's happening, folks. Here's how it works. So the sun comes down, solar power, it goes into these solar arrays being held up by lasers above us. It creates the electricity that's beamed down to a radio frequency array antenna, and then RF, and these are the mirrors they're talking about here. And then the RF power, radio frequency power, is beamed down to an antenna down on the ground to the solar panels, which creates electricity, and then they go through the grid. That's how they're planning on doing it, in creating solar power and the rationale and whatnot for all the benefits as well. So, I just want to give you a big heads up on that. And then here's another way they're going to be telling you is fossil fuel producers responsible for half of global temperature rise and also the oceans rising. If you get into this article, it's fossil fuels have contributed to the increase in global temperature, sea level rising, more than 40 million in damage to the county alone in San Mateo. The climatic change in the study published in Climatic Change Journal, I guess, top fossil fuel producers such as Chevron are responsible for as much as half of the rise in world temperatures and about 30% of the rise in sea levels. So you see how they're going to do this and take it to us, folks? All right, so let's get into the non-event that turned out. Why would they do this to us? Why do they want to treat humanity this way? One is the Georgia Guidestones, which please look up the Georgia Guidestones and outside Atlanta, Georgia, to reduce the population. But this is a much more spiritual battle going on, the war in heavens and the fall down into the earthly realm. But look at number one, stupidity. Stupidity. And 5 is herd conformity, folks. And I would add ignorance along with stupidity. I mean, we have so much information. This is a model of geoengineering from the Royal Institute, all right, and the IPCC, the Grand Poobahs of weather. And here they are showing you all the different systems they're using: land, sea, and air. We're going to get into the air, a new documentation that another reader sent to me from the Truth Channel about lasers. Lasers being used to modify weather from above that none of the geoengineering sites or anyone is talking about. And I want to take you just for a second and just understand the technology is so advanced. If they can get Wi-Fi traveling at 30,000 feet going 500 miles an hour and find your computer, what have all these guys been able to do with technology, folks? They got weather derivative markets. Wall Street's hitting new highs today. They knew what was going to happen in Florida. So this is an article from July 13th, 2017. How did they know? A blackout about a massive solar storm. The last massive solar storm was on September 1st, 1859, during hurricane season, missing the era of global electrification by just a couple of decades. The sun spit out a stream of plasma, white light, and electrons. Was strong enough to completely overwhelm Earth's magnetic fields when it crashed into them just hours later. The 33, there you go, year old astronomer named Richard Carrington was trying to project sunspots into a plate of glass when he thought a ray of light had penetrated a hole in the screen attached to the object, for brilliancy was fully equal to that of direct sunlight. This is their space mirrors, folks, they're talking about. That's now the Carrington event. The sun's electrons arrived and promptly found telegraph wires, causing power surges that shocked operators, set fire. Red, green, purple auras lit up in the sky in the Bahamas. Even in the cities where it's still nighttime, newspapers could read as easily as daylight. In 1859, there wasn't any electrical infrastructure, but in today's completely electricity-dependent society, we're much more vulnerable. Then it goes down here to state. It's difficult to predict the extent, but it would cost around $1 to $2 trillion the first year. How about loss of life? 4 to 10 years necessary for a full recovery. The storm would destroy the entire fleet of satellites. Global communications would be destroyed so rapidly, humans wouldn't even know it or able to find out that a solar storm had hit. The bad news, get this, we don't have any idea when the next one's going to hit, but it comes about once every 500 years. That's what they say. So are they creating this event? It's going to be a solar EMP, electromagnetic pulse event, that blows out the power so they can get the world high altitude based world-based power system in place. Stay tuned, folks. It's just going to get more interesting. And I want to bring your attention to this ABC miniseries that was broadcast back in 1987 called America with a K, featured Chris Christopherson and some top actors, Robert Ulrich at the time. America was about life in the United States after a bloodless takeover engineered by the Soviet Union. It was focusing on demoralized U.S. people after a decade after the Soviet conquest. That was 10 years after they'd taken over the United States. It aired for 14 and a half hours over 7 nights in a row, 2 hours a night. And get down here about the story plot line. Towards the end of the 1980s, the decline of the Soviet Union puts it in danger of losing the Cold War. The Soviet leadership makes a desperate gamble to rearrange the global balance of power. 4 large thermonuclear weapons are detonated in the ionosphere over the United States. The resulting electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, destroys the nation's communications and computer systems, cripples the U.S. electrical grid, and affects any equipment that relies on computer technology, such as most late-model automobiles. 1987, folks, they were predicting this. Let's get into the EIS, Electronic Infrastructure Security Council, and EarthX, trademarked, in a minute. But just to recap what happened in Houston last month, August 24th at 8 p.m. to August 30th, 3 a.m. Now look at these rainfalls. See the big thing, 60 inches here? We had reports in 45 inches, but it was actually 60 inches, 62 inches reported in Port Arthur, Beaumont. But right next to it, Iowa got 16. Lake Charles got 9 inches. How does that happen when a storm is over for 6 days, sitting over them? Never happened before. 5.6 in New Orleans, but Cedar Bayou gets 51.8, Houston gets 43, and then 6 inches over here. I mean, this was a massive storm, the greatest hurricane, quote, it wasn't a hurricane, it was man-made, over the coast, all right? So let's get into the energy stuff. So here is the National and Homeland Security Task Force. Is concerned about the vulnerability of our electric grid, a call to action. Experts say our power grid can be destroyed, and when that happens, 70 to 90% of the U.S. population will die within the first year. Experts also say it is not a mere possibility, but a near certainty that the grid will be hit, and it could happen at any time. 6 congressional blue ribbon commissions and several independent research organizations agree with this statement. And they're protecting against any and all threats, including cyber, physical attacks, extreme solar weather, and non-nuclear, nuclear electromagnetic pulse, or EMT. Dr. Pry, Executive Director, Task Force on Homeland Security, and he's writing about the new dark ages as of 2016 and gets into some of the same stuff as well. But you might all remember that the worries over the power grid rose back in, this is August 2013. I remember we were all worried that the power was going to go off and that they're going to shut down the power everywhere. And New York Times, setting the pump, priming the pump for the future event. Problem, reaction, solution. That's how it works. So this is from the EarthX website, EIS Council. Their highlights for disrupted scenarios. EarthX simulates a subcontinent scale, long duration power outage with cascading failures of all other infrastructures. All other infrastructures. The exercise format offers executive and senior level operation decision makers the opportunity to review critical decision making essential to the success of all other response and recovery operations. And it goes on to list the different events that they were hosting here. So if we go through their overview from August 23rd, right as the hurricane or flood Harvey was starting, emergency all-sector response transnational hazard exercise was going on. And here's the space-based system they're talking about, or the high altitude, whichever way you want to refer it. And this is the grid they're putting over us to establish their world power base from space. So here we get into the mission is designed to improve community resilience to large-scale, long-duration power outages through multiple exercises. Okay, so here's the grid, focus the United States. Look at the power grid over it. Concerns have grown over the potential for severe, malicious, or natural black sky hazards associated with subcontinent scale long duration power outages with cascading failure of all other increasingly interdependent infrastructures. This creates a grim and difficult dilemma. Restoration of any sector will only be possible at least minimal operation of all the others. To deal with this deadlock, careful sector by sector and cross-sector resilience planning is crucial. However, such plans to be effective must be exercised. The diversity and national and global scale of the infrastructures are now depend on. This requires unprecedented multi-sector, national, and international exercise series. But notice how they're focusing on the U.S. only, folks, here. Hosted by EIS Council as part of ePro Resource Families. These annual multi-sector international exercises are being developed to evaluate and improve restoration support, preparedness, response, and recovery plans for severe hazards. Now we're going to get into the man-made hazards they talk about here, but before we get into that, look at the map they chose to use, folks. And they had to tilt the United States to make it work like this. And I want you to see this right up here. This is the southwest, southeast, and looks like the Bay Area, Los Angeles up in there. But this is the sites they chose, which coincides pretty dang well with the Jade Helm exercises going on right in here. And Walmart closing maps. See all in the southwest, southeast? And the risk of continuity, they got the map right here. Where are they focusing, folks? They're focusing on the south, southeast, and then out here, possibly out in Los Angeles and San Francisco as well. So they're telling you what they're going to do. It's just a question of when they decide to enact it. So let's get back to this EIS Council, man-made EMP event we talked about, cyber terrorism. But then, right down here under natural hazards, which aren't natural at all, it's geoengineering for anybody paying attention. Before and after the storm documents, Department of Energy and other government-sponsored reports to highlight risk of climate change, increasing temperatures, decreasing water availability, more intense storm events, and sea level rise, each independently and some in combination affect the ability of the United States to produce and transmit electricity. Now, as I'll show, there's people from Israel, there's people from Sweden, there's people from all over that are on the EIS Council, but all they're focusing on is the United States here. That's all they're talking about. These factors, along with the risk of infrequent mega events failing outside the range of projected extreme storm events, suggest that future weather event damage will not remain within the limits of recent experience or within the bounds of straightforward scaling from such an experience. And then they can cite their articles. All right, so let's get over to here. This is protection initiatives and resilience and how they're going to be resilient. Resilience planning and investment represent the foundation of any such mitigation efforts that must be built. Expanding the focus on the power grid's black start system. Did you know there was a black start system, folks? A critical requirement for black sky hazard resilience. The core resilience foundation of the three electric interconnections that make up the U.S. national power grid is the black start system, generating stations and cranking paths designed to be capable of restarting and functioning as a starting point for grid restart following local or regional power outage. The system has been subject of careful planning and investment and is properly considered a reliable and essential basis for the resilience of power grid from the full range of gray sky hazards experienced in modern times. One finding emerging from EPRO ESC meetings has been the concern voiced frequently by senior power executives of the availability of trained specialized labor to handle the expected unprecedented restoration workload. These executives have pointed out that typically trained engineering teams capable of handling projected hazards like cyber EMP are already in normal blue sky scenarios. They're significantly understaffed. With widely distributed multi-regional power grid hardware and IT and OT system disruption and damage, it will require far larger levels of trained engineering staff, and with many regions facing the same needs, availability of engineers from other utilities will be limited. So they have the CPR, I don't know what CPR stands for, engineering team lays out examples for such a mechanism based on plans for advanced certification and periodic training of engineers with expertise in the disciplines would provide a capability for added engineering and technical staff and be closely directed and utilized by engineering teams that will be in very short supply for such emergencies. See how they're anticipating? Now look at the participating agencies that are involved in the EIS, EPRO, advanced fusions. I mean, look at all these electric companies. This is all the big guys, folks. And notice it's all the United States. They're talking an international coalition, but all they have is mostly is United States, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. You got telecommunications, Hitachi, phone systems, water systems here, San Jose, Las Vegas. Where is this, folks? South. Here's the United States organizations. And we got our NGOs, the main NGOs taking over, the wonderful American Red Double Cross, Salvation Army, Southern Baptist Relief, U.S. National Labs. They got their science and engineers too for storm analysis, and the colleges that they fund, that we fund to pay for all this stuff. And here's all the foundations that are behind it. I'll get into these probably another time and do the workup on who's behind all this stuff. And then here's all the trade associations, American Power, Grid Protection, National Emergency Management, a generator forum. I mean, they're all in on this, folks. They're all being coordinated. California Public Utility Commission, Pennsylvania, Washington, Wisconsin. They're all in on it. All right, priorities. EarthX simulates a subcontinental scale power outage. We already went through that. Publications. Look how long they've been planning. Planning for a long time. One thing I always like to do is get into the players. Who are the players behind this? Well, it's the military, folks. It's everybody in the military. State and federal government, Department of Defense. This guy advised the Department of Energy, National Security Council, Federal FERC, Federal Regulatory Commission, National Nuclear, Department of Homeland Security, met with key governments and NGO stakeholders. He's the coordinating guy that brings them all together. And also Dr. Paul Stockton, Assistant Secretary of Defense and Homeland Security, co-editor of the book, Environmental Infrastructure Protection. He has reviewed U.S. defense policies for the Department of Defense, White House Homeland Security, National Academy of Sciences. Worked for Northrop Grumman's Space Technology, folks, okay? And then this guy over here, Chris Beck, served in the Marine Corps. And then here's the Director of Programming and Operational Architecture, retired U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who served as second career practicing enterprise system architects for 25 years. Served the Army for over 23 years, folks. It's all the military. See how they work? And then you see he has a Master of Science in Hydro Systems Engineering. Talking about infrastructure breaking, and he's a hydrist. What do you think the floods are doing? He is a registered professional engineer, Commonwealth, and serves as a board of advisors for the United States Military Academy. All right, and here we have John Heltzel, Director of Resilience Planning, over his 33 years military career. There's that number again, folks. 2007, General Heltzel directed the CDI effort design and execute, funded fully spectrum vulnerability assessment, identifying cyber risks, public electric utilities, and financial institutions. During his tenure, he modernized the emergency management division called Community Hazard Assessment and Mitigation Planning Systems, or CHAMPS. They love their acronyms, folks. General Hetzel served as chairman of the Central United States Earthquake Consortium from 2009 to 12. HARP is what causes earthquakes. Doppler, NEXRAD are the steering devices for the weather mechanisms. HARP does not steer weather. So here's where it gets really good. So Avi Schnur worked for Northrop Grumman Space Technology Sector, where he had systems responsibilities for space payloads and other advanced systems and instruments, and also managed U.S. and international defense programs. He holds a number of patents in laser and optical systems and twice received the Corporate Chairman's Award for Innovation. Space-based lasers, folks. All right, Dr. Neil Siegel, Chief Engineer, held the position of Vice President, Chief Technology Officer at, drumroll please, Northrop Grumman's Information Sector. Sector's Vice President in charge of 12,000 scientists and engineers. He's been responsible for several projects outside the United States, UK, Egypt, Germany, Turkey. He coordinates them all. U.S. Blue Force Tracker, Army's first unmanned drone, the Forward Area Air Defense Systems, and many others. Repeatedly cited as model programs and important national capabilities. He's worked with the steel industry, movie industry, and other commercial enterprises. And then if you look also here, just down you see that it's an international. Here's a vice president, Israeli operations. He's a vice president from Israel. The communications director works in Washington, D.C. Here's the sector coordinators, federal government, state, non-government. These are all the guys underneath, the assistance guys. And here we have financial sector coordinator, talks to the money guys, and private sector. You get a pretty girl in there to talk to the money guys. That's how they roll, folks. So this is EIS Council. I'll put this in the show notes, but they're describing what they're doing. They're organizing it. They were trying to do it by 2016. Now they pushed it back to 2020. Geostorm movie's coming out in a couple weeks. It's going to further pump the prime that weather events causing power outages, and once the power outages come, then they're going to take over and put in the world high altitude, space-based, whatever you want to call it, worldwide grid system, starting with the United States likely, starting with the southeast, where they're going to flood everybody out, cause mass loss of life. They were estimating between 70 to 90%. And all we can do is prepare and awake and be alert. So head up and on a swivel. Please pass this on. I wanted to get this out. I'm sorry it's so long, but it's important information that needs to get out. All right, so that's it for A Plain Truth. We'll catch you on the next video, Doc. And Love one another, folks, and help each other. Help the people in Hurricane Harvey. Anything you can do to send any supplies, foods. They need fans. They need everything. No one. There's thousands and thousands of people are homeless there. They're going to be out of homes for a year at least. They have nowhere to go and no one to help. So anything you can do will be appreciative. All right, that's it for Plain Truth. Catch you on the next vid doc. Peace. Now, this is what I want to bring your attention to just for a quick sec. James Rogers, Hermosa Beach, Gary T. Spurnack. They're with the Solarin Corporation. Let's take a quick look because it's going to apply a little later here when we get into this.
When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
Go ahead.
Well, this fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War.
Work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong, Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and uttering mumbo jumbo. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now.
Laser at a power of 1 watt. And if you don't want to use your energy to strike your match, you can just hold it in the beam of light.
A 1 watt laser can light a match. Imagine then the power of a 500 trillion watt laser. That's exactly what they've built here at the National Ignition Facility in California, where engineers have just finished constructing the laser to end all lasers. In fact, 192 of the world's most powerful lasers, all focused on a tiny hydrogen target. If they can be made to strike at the same time, and when I say the same time, I mean within 1/1000th of a second, then the energy inside the atoms will be released, creating in one moment 500 times more energy than the entire American national grid. This incredible energy release is from nuclear fusion.
What is fusion power?
Well, fusion power is what's going on inside the sun, right? You know, and that is when we crush hydrogen together, we get this fusion to happen, we turn mass into energy, and that energy comes out, and if we can collect it and turn it into electricity, that's what we want to power our civilization. We get this fusion to happen, we turn mass into energy, and that energy comes out, and if we can collect it and turn it into electricity, that's what we want to power our civilization.
And in the laboratory, sure enough, they precipitate rain out of water vapor. Sure enough, you can actually bring down electricity down the beam.
So what is
electricity down the beam?
So what is
electricity down the beam?
So what is
So here's a press release from 2016 from Solarin Corporation, next phase of their Space Solar Development Program, or SSP, Space Solar Development Program. And what you'll see is engineered zero-emission electricity from space that's cost competitive with any terrestrial source of baseload electricity. Design, develop, integrate, test, and certify space solar power. Coming decade, it will perform unprecedented components, subsystems, and testing to validate all aspects, and the multi-billion-dollar development program culminates with the launch of Solarin solar power satellites, operational certification, and the start of commercial operations and sales of electricity from their 250 megawatt SSP plant in the air, folks. So if we look at the team, which I always try and do, Dr. Rogers, co-founder, distinguished career at Hughes Aircraft, held key technical positions, developing the state-of-the-art systems for NASA, Department of Defense, field components for advanced space-based systems, spacecraft power generation, thermal and optical sensors. All right, so let's look at the other co-founder, Gary T. Spernak. Mr. Spernak has 33 years of experience in the industry. He's founder and the CEO of Solarin, first commercially viable space solar company. Held a number of key positions at Boeing Satellite Systems, has an extensive experience in space system development at Hughes, managed a major national security program to include successful multi-million-dollar R&D, that had to be for DARPA, and also he has a distinguished military career with the Air Force and other spacecraft project engineer at Cape Canaveral. All military guys, folks, running this program. All right, so let's get back to the patent here. But before we do, real quick, I forgot about this. I wanted to show you. Russia announces issuance of space solar power system patent. This is just right at the same time of the previous announcement. The issuance of the key solar patent to Solarin. Now, Solarin now has key enabling SSP system patents in all of the world's major spacefaring countries. Solarin now has key enabling SSP system patents in all of the world's major spacefaring countries. All of the world, all right? And one of the projects they've floated is used to space mirrors to reflect sunlight back, but that's not what they're doing the space mirrors for. This shows it right here, folks. Let me get up the highlight. But the basic gist goes something: launch and robotically assemble several hundred or thousand identically sized modules in geosynchronous orbit. One part compromises mirrors to reflect and concentrate sunlight into solar panels that convert the energy into electricity. Converters turn that electricity into low-intensity microwaves and are beamed to large circular receivers on the ground. All right, so they're in the business of making mirrors, which is going to play into what I'm going to show you here in this patent again, okay? And here you can see the mirrors being used here to amplify and then send down to the ground-based stations, whether it be a radio beacon or the solar panels here. And here you see the mirror image again in this next figure. All right, so let's get into the hurricanes, how they're using it to affect hurricanes and steer the hurricanes and intensify it. And here's just one more to show you how they're using amplification, mirrors, radio frequencies, and sunlight to direct and amplify weather and amplify the sun's radio frequencies as well, the cosmic ray. So stepping it way down to the other end, there's a common laser you can probably get at 7-Eleven that's effectively able to shine light up to 10, 11,000 feet and disturb pilots landing and taking off an aircraft, which many documentations around the world. Common off-the-shelf item, but I wanted to get into how they get above the clouds and they can easily steer the weather, they can warm, they can pulse it, all those things that we're documenting from below, and all the other geoengineering sites and chemtrail sites only document the chemtrail spraying from above, but I haven't heard anybody talk about the manipulation by laser-guided systems. But it's clearly known. If you look at the U.S. Air Force, they clearly have laser-guided weapons. Look at this machinery here. High-energy layer modules, and whatnot right in the nose, and they can direct it right above the clouds. They can heat the clouds, they can steer the clouds, they just change the energy frequencies. They can also hold things aloft from below. And here's a video I want to show you about exactly how that's being done and kept stationary.
Two demonstrations. The left bottom one was recorded in visible light, and the main one was recorded in infrared light. The photonic laser thruster is powered on, and the platform is gradually accelerated by photon thrust exerted on the glowing mirror. Photon thrust is amplified by recycling photons between two highly reflective mirrors. One is mounted on the mobile platform, and the other is on the laser head to the right. The recycling photon beam is visible as a glowing line reaching the mirror. The photon thrust is in the range of 0.5 to 1 millinewtons, and the recycling photons bounce back and forth about 400 times. Once the platform reaches the end of the track, the platform bounces back on a rubber band. The occasional sparks in the laser beam result from the exploding micrometer-sized particles in the cleanroom air and indicate the recycling laser power is extremely high. In fact, The power is in the range of 75 to 150 kilowatts. As the platform approaches the starting point, it is gradually slowed down by the photon thrust. Without the photon thrust, the platform would continue to move and eventually hit the structure on the right side at full speed. After stopping, the platform is propelled back again. Our successful demonstration proves the feasibility of precision propellant-free spacecraft maneuvering and the formation flying with a photonic laser thruster, and establishes the flight demonstration in space as our next milestone.
Doesn't mean for drought areas that need to have rain for crops, and if they don't have them, there's the consequences of famine.
Well, the bad news is if it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to do anything at all because it only takes water vapor that's already in the air and condenses it. However, for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
Incredibly interesting, Professor Michio Kaku. Thank you so much.
In an interview aired by CBS, Dr. Kaku admitted that recent homemade hurricanes have been the result of government weather modification programs in which the skies were sprayed with nanoparticles and storms then activated through the use of lasers. It says in an interview below, Michio discusses the history of weather modifications before CBS crew stop him in his tracks. The High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, HAARP, was created in the early 1990s as part of the Ionospheric Research Program jointly funded by the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA. According to government officials, HAARP allows the military to modify and weaponize the weather by triggering earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes.
They were talking about climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning.
So I want to thank the Truth Zone for this patent that he just posted, or she posted on the comment section from my article yesterday, or video doc from on Hurricane Harvey. Very important document here. September 9th, 2010, weather management using space-based power systems. Space-based power systems, a method of altering weather using space-borne energy, okay? Now it says down here, free-floating power system elements are maintained in proper relative alignment, position, orientation, and shape using a control system. Energy from the space-based power system is applied to a weather element, such as a hurricane, and alters the weather element to weaken or dissipate the weather element. They can also make it more intense, folks. Okay.
CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, nice to see you. Lasers, really, to change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it.
All right, so let's get into the hurricanes, how they're using it to affect hurricanes and steer the hurricanes and intensify it. All right, so here on figure 18, we start to see the hurricanes and how this is applied and how it applies to Hurricane Harvey as we speak today. And this is a chart here, which I want to, there we go. All right, so here's the space-based power system, that's Solarin. Here's the radio frequency RF energies, and here they're concentrating it off the coast of Florida. Isn't that interesting? Remember, this is a patent from 2010, folks. Okay, now here's how the mirrors come into play. Sunlight comes in, reflects, power module, output mirror, weather element, RF frequency. Remember how they bring the weather up from the Gulf of Mexico way down south? It started 7 days ago, August 16th, I believe, and then they use the radio frequency energy off the coast. And you see the radio frequency tracking beam. You see, it's not it comes on shore in the storm's path. This is the exact path that they came on. I guess that's Florida, but the same path that came into the Gulf of Mexico that Weather War 101 was showing, using RF tracking beams, okay, to steer the weather. intensely. And as you go down, you see the groups of thunderstorms. And folks, it's showing you exactly how they do it. This is how they take the weather, create the hurricanes, amplify the hurricanes, hurricane airflows. This will be in the show notes. So this is in the summary, and what is claimed here is a space-based power system for altering the weather, okay? And you can get into it, and it lists all the different types of ways they are altering the weather with these systems. They have it figured out, folks. The technology has been readily available for a very, very, very long time. Again, thank you for putting this very important document to my alert. I really appreciate it. Truth Channel. And here's the documentation at the very end of this summation of the 45-page document on water vapor machines, space-based and otherwise. What is claimed is a space-based power system for altering weather. Generate electrical energy from the collected sunlight and convert the electric energy into radio frequency energy that is applied to a weather element and to alter and weaken the weather element. They can also increase it, folks. Number 5, radio frequency energy generated by the space-based power system and converts absorbed energy to thermal energy that is transferred to the weather element to alter and weaken the weather element. 6, the system of claim wherein the energy absorbing element is aluminum oxide. What do they spray in the skies with barium? Aluminum oxide, folks. Here it is. Number 7, the claims wherein the energy absorbing element is plastic. Is this why we have the Texas plastic patches and plastics being allowed to be permeated throughout all our oceans? So to get this, look at the size that they're energy absorbing. The element has the length of 0.6 of an inch and a width of about 0.01 inch and a thickness of 0.001 inch. We're talking tiny, tiny material here, folks. We're using energy absorption. Energy absorbing element is sufficiently low so that the energy absorbing element is substantially buoyant with the water element, so it stays up on the surface.
Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far it works.